All right, Jabosai, let's begin. Jabosai, so today's daf is Tesvav. We're picking up for you in Dalam base. I want to welcome Mr. Schoenfeld on the Yomi recording because people who listen on the podcast get worried if you're not here. I get emails with Mr. Schoenfeld there today. Ed Miller gets a special. I want to give him a shout out. He gets especially worried. All right, so let's begin. So we're back a little bit today to just some of the basic halachas of Sotah. But again, beautiful Gemara. So we're picking up. We are picking up V'nosna l'soch kli sharis. So 4 lines up from the bottom, Yudalet on the base. Remember again, the Mishnah described the entire process of Sotah, and now at this point in time, we're in the Beis Hamikdash, and we're going ahead and going step by step through this process, specifically through the offering of her carbon mincha. So okay, fine. So the Mishnah said the following: remember, the Mishnah said the Kohen takes the komets, right, which is the 3 fingerfuls of the flour mixed with the greatest concentration of oil, and he puts it into another kli sharis. Right, he puts it into another temple. Remember, kli sharis is any utensil that is ultimately sanctified for temple service. So the Gemara says, "Lamali ha kitcha chadazimna." Shabbos asks the Gemara, why does he have to put the komets into another kli sharis? After all, what? The entire mincha has already been sanctified once in a kli sharis. Meaning, once you've been, essentially, the Gemara is asking is like this: once you've sanctified something in a kli sharis, ultimately, again, there is no need to go ahead and re-sanctify it. So says the Gemara. Once you've put the entire mincha into the kli sharis, so why the need to go and put the komets? Midi dehava adam, to which the Gemara says, because it's no different than blood. Afagav de kadishise sakin b'tzavra behema. Even though this is actually very interesting. So from the Gemara's perspective, the knife is a kli sharis as well. So therefore, again, once you shech the animal, by definition, the animal has already been sanctified with the kli sharis, the sakin, which of course is very interesting because we know that shechita is kshera bizar. You do not need a kohen to slaughter a sacrificial animal. Even a non-kohen could do it, but nevertheless, the sakin itself has the din of a kli sharis. So just like you've already used the kli sharis, yet nevertheless, hadar makdish lebe kli sharis, you still put the blood in the kli sharis. Hachanami lo shla. So too over here, there's no distinction. In other words, what the Gemara essentially answers is that when it comes to sacrificial service, so we only use a kli sharis. So even though I don't need a kli sharis to sanctify the komets, because the komets has already been sanctified when? In the original kli sharis, which the entire mincha was put into, but again, what we'll call it as temple SOP, right? So basically, their standard operating procedures is we go ahead and we always use a kli sharis, sanctified utensil. So remember again, when you took the kamitza, you pushed the lavona to the side, took the kamitza, put it into another kli sharis, then you take the lavona from the first kli sharis and put it on top of the kamitza. Dichsiv, how do we know this? Ve'eskal halavona sha'ala mincha. Okay, because the pasuk says it. Because you'll take all of the lavona and you'll put it on the karma mincha. Umaleu umaktiru b'kli sharis. Daf Tesvav. You go ahead and now you take that komets, which is inside the kli sharis. And I both say what it sounds like is you take the kli sharis and you literally offer the mincha on the kli sharis on top of the mizbeach. Right? Isn't that what it is? This meaning what the Gemara? So it sounds like I'm literally taking the kli sharis and putting it on top of the fire. So the Gemara says, "B'kli sharis makdulei." Are you actually going ahead and offering this mincha inside the kli sharis on top of the fire? Elaima ma'alehu b'kli sharis laktir. Rather, what the Mishnah means is you bring up the kamitza in the kli sharis to the mizbeach, and you empty the kamitza onto the mizbeach itself, but you don't place the kli sharis on the fire itself. But before again you pour out the kamitza from the kli sharis, remember you add salt. You add salt to the kamitza, and then you go ahead and you place it on the fire. Because the pasuk says v'chol karban minchascha v'melach timlach. Because the pasuk says every karban mincha, and remember it's not just every karban mincha, it's every karban ultimately has to be salted. Karav hakometz shiareha ne'achalin. So remember again, the halacha is that once a person offers up the komets, the remaining part of the mincha can be consumed. Right. So remember again, once the komets is offered up, that's the only part that's offered on the mizbeach. Everything else is consumed by the kohanim. Minalan, how do we know this? As karasa, Because on one hand, the pasuk says that the kohen will offer up as karasa means the kometz, means the sacrificial part, uksiv, and the pasuk says v'hano seres min ha-mincha li-aron ule-banav. And yet the following pasuk says the remaining part of the mincha will ultimately be offered up to Aaron and his sons. So what the Gemara is noting is the juxtaposition. Only after the hiktir, only after the kometz is offered up, only then can Aaron and his sons have the rest of the mincha. And this is very interesting. So karava kometz. So now, interestingly enough, what is the definition of the kometz being offered up? In other words, what the Gemara is really asking is, so how much of the kometz has to burn in order for the kometz to go ahead and be considered to be offered? And I will say that question has two ramifications. Number one, at what point is the avoda considered to be done? And also for our purposes, at what point in time can the kohanim eat the rest of the mincha? Because remember, we've established they can only eat the rest of the mincha after the kometz has been offered. At what point is it quote-unquote called offered? To which the Gemara says, Lamar ki de islay. Ulamar ki de islay, it's a machlokes. This one holds this way, and this one holds this way. Di itmar, ha-kometz me'imasai matir shirayim ba'achila. So at what point in time, that literally means, at what point in time does the offering of the kometz permit the consumption by the kohanim of the rest of the mincha, which is another way of saying, at what point in time is the kometz considered to be offered and allow the kohanim to eat the remainder of the mincha? Rabbi Chanina Amar, Mishetishlot Baha'ar. So Rabbi Chanina says, as soon as the kometz catches fire, as soon as it catches fire, meaning even though the kometz is not yet consumed, as soon as it catches fire, bless you, it's considered to be offered. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mishetatzis Ha'ar Birubo. On the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan says no, the fire has to take hold on the majority of the kometz, meaning the majority of the kometz has to be burnt in order for it to be considered offered, and in order ultimately again for the kohanim to eat the rest of the mincha. So you should know that Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yochanan, namely that the kometz is only considered to be offered mishetitzas ha'ar berubo, when the fire goes ahead and impacts the majority of the mincha, causing it to be burnt. Only then can the kohanim eat the rest of the mincha. V'rashan ha'kohanim litin l'socho yain b'shem udvash. Remember the Mishnah said. So we'll say, see now, remember this really, if you think about it, this really is fascinating, because what this is, you could close your eyes and you could see this. You were literally being walked through the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, which for us non-kohanim, who are exceptionally jealous. For us non-Kohanim, remember again, this is pretty much as close as we're going to get to this. So to see this description in such vivid detail is amazing. So remember, at this point in time now, the kometz has been burnt on the Mizbeach, which means now that the Kohanim can now go ahead and eat the rest of the mincha. So the Mishnah said that the Kohanim are permitted to add whatever additives, whatever ingredients they want, meaning they don't just have to eat straight flour and oil. They can go ahead and add whatever they want, with one caveat, which is that it can't become chametz. So says the Gemara, so they can put in wine or oil or honey, because the pasuk says, "Bless you, lemashcha." What meaning when talking about the kohanim's ability to go and eat the rest of the mincha, calls lemashcha. What does lemashcha mean? Ligidula, kidar shamalach and ochlin. So lemashcha translates ultimately again. If you look at Rashi says it's by the pasuk Abi matnos guneksiv lecha nesatim lemashcha. So we'll say, so that wording the Gemara understands to mean ligdula. Mashcha literally means like anointing. It means that you are permitted to consume this in a bakavadik way, in the way that malachim, the way that royalty eats. So the same way that royalty is going to eat something only after adding whatever additives, so too again, Kohanim, when you eat the remainder of the mincha, you could eat it however you want. The only one caveat, only one restriction is you can't allow the mincha to become chametz. Tichsev lo sofe chametz chalkam, because the pasuk says lo se'afe chametz chalkam. You may not allow it to become chametz. Fine. Amar b'Shimon Lakish. Afilu chelkam lo se'afeh chametz. So Rish Lakish says what it means is afilu chelkam, meaning what it's saying is, why does it have to say? You could just say lo se'afeh chametz. Why does it have to say lo se'afeh chametz chelkam? To teach me not only can the chometz not become chametz, but not the chometz, the kometz. Not only can the kometz not become chametz, right? The three fingerfuls that's offered up on the zech, but what? Afilu chelkam, even their portion cannot become chametz. So kol menachos. So remember again, the Mishnah said that all menachos need shemen and levona. all menachos need oil and levona. So says the Gemara, is that true? The chala menachos tu'uno shemen levona. Is that true that every single mincha requires shemen and levona? V'ha'ika minchas chote. But there is the case of minchas chote. They're both saying, now what's the case of minchas chote? If you take a look at Rashi for just a moment, Rashi says, minchas chote, haba achet dimitami mikdosh, ushvuas ha'idos, ushvuas bitoy, dichsiv hasam v'lo sasig yodol shtei torim. So both say, listen to this. If a person goes ahead and comes into the Beis HaMikdash tamei, right, this is talking about a situation where they didn't realize it, or a person eats consecrated items in a state of tumah, or they swear falsely, there's something called minchas chote. It's a kar mincha that's brought. So the Gemara says, minchas chote, derachmana amar, lo yasim ale shemen v'lo yitin ale levona. So the Mishnah made it sound like what? Every single mincha you put on it shemen and levona. It's not true. There is this case of minchas chote where what Rabbi say? You don't put shemen and you don't put levona on it. To which the Gemara says, so it's a kasha, right? It's a question. Sachi Kamar, this is what it means to say, Kala menachos tu'unos shemen levona. So let's listen to this. In reality, all menachos require oil and levona. Ubaos minachitin, ubaos solas, and normally all menachos come from wheat and solas. Solas means they're from fine flour. However, minchas chote, afapi she'ena tu'unos shemen levona. So let's say essentially what the Gemara is saying is like this. Every single mincha requires shemen and levona, except for the ones that don't, right? So in other words, every single, meaning you can make a principle say just because there's an exception to the rule doesn't mean the rule is not true. So the rule is that menachos requires shemen and levona. There's an exception to that rule. Now let me say it differently. The rule is that menachos require three things. Number one, shemen and levona, and we'll count those as one. Shemen and levona. Number two, chitin wheat. Number three, soles, fine flour. However, now says the Gemara, that's the rule, but there are exceptions to the rule. Exception number one is minchas chote, afa pi she'enatuna shemen levona, even though it doesn't require shemen levona, ba'a min achitin. So even though it does not require criteria number one. I mean, it doesn't require shemen levona, but it still comes from grain. From wheat, right? Solas, and it still has to come. It has to be fine flour. Now, there's another exception. What's the other exception? Minchas ha'omer, apapisha ba'minas sa'orin. So we'll say. So remember the omer. So even though the omer doesn't come from wheat, it comes from barley. So it doesn't conform to one criteria, but it does conform to the other. Tu'una shemen and levona. It still requires shemen and levona. Uba'a garash, and it has to be fine flour. Vizu eina tu'una, however, again, the other exception is sotah. Vizu eina tu'una, lo shemen velo levona, uba'a minas sa'orin, uba'a kemach. So I will say, again, interestingly enough, the one mincha that seems to not conform to any of the rules is the minchas sotah. Because the minchas sotah comes from barley, doesn't require shemen and levona, and is not fine flour, rather is coarse meal. So I will say, so this is just interesting, just out sacrificial law. So again, the general klal by a carbon mincha, so somebody stops you and asks you, by the way, do you happen to know the criteria for carbon mincha? You could say, funny, you should ask. It has to be, again, shemen and levona, we'll count it as one. Number two, chitin. Number three, soles. The exceptions to those rules, minchas chote, which conforms to everything except the fact that there's no shemen and levona, minchas omer, which conforms to all of them except that it's sa'orim, and minchas sotah. Now, minchas sotah is the greatest outlier because minchas sotah does not conform to any of the stipulations or to any part of the framework of normative carbon mincha. So Tanya, Amr Shimon, bedinhu shetei minchas. Listen, this is very interesting. Bedinhu shetei minchas chote tu'una shemen levona. So we'll say, here's what's fascinating. In reality, says Reb Shimon, in reality, a minchas chote should require shemen and levona. Should ultimately require the oil and the levona. Why? Shelo yehei chote niskar. So we'll say, so you have to understand something. If you don't have to bring oil and levona on your carbon mincha, guess what? That's a savings. That's Reb Shimon says, in reality, we have a concept in halacha of shelo yehei chote niskar, that a sinner should never profit. Remember again, we saw this in Ksuvas. Remember again, the halacha is that if a woman is not a basula, if a woman is not a virgin at the time she gets married, so the halacha is the ksuva is only 100 zuz, only 100. She's 100 mana. So interestingly enough, there's an exception to that rule. What's the exception to that rule? Bu'ulas atzmo. If the reason that she's not a basula is because she lived with the chassan, so he has to pay a full ksuva, right? Why? Shelo yehi chote niskar, because every guy is going to have a great chap, right? Right? Again, there's an easy way to go ahead and diminish the amount of the ksuva by living with his kala before the wedding. So Chazal said, no. If you are the reason she's not a besula, then you are on the hook for the entire ksuva amount. Why? Shelo yehi chote niskar. So same idea here. Shimon says, why are we letting the chote, why are we letting the sinner get off easily with a carbon that doesn't require shemen and lavona? He should have to. So why is it that we say that he doesn't have to bring push shemen and lavona? Shelo yehi karbano muhudar. Because Rabbi say again, we don't want his carbon to be beautiful. That's the issue over here. The issue here is that, again, shemen and lavona beautifies the carbon, and because his actions were inappropriate, we do not want his carbon to be beautiful. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, but listen to this. But the chatos of a mitzora. So remember again, this is talking about at the end of the tzara'as process. So the mitzora ultimately brings a chatos, va'ashama, and his asham offering, to unin nisachim. We must remember again, Nisachim Rashi points out over here, Solas lamincha v'sar on the kavis yain, v'shemen revi isahin, kimoshe makrivin la'olor sham. So we'll say Nisachim over here in this context refers to certain wine libations as well as meal offerings. So the chatos of a mitzora requires nisachin. Why? Lefi she'in ba'in al chet. Because Rabbi say, even though again the mitzora is bringing a chatos, the Gemara assumes that chatos is not associated with sin. Therefore, again, it has to go ahead and be accompanied by wine libations. So Gemara says, Ini, is that true that the chatos of the mitzora doesn't come because of sin? Va'amra b'shmuel bar Nachmani, amra b'yonasan, al shiva dvarim negoim bayin. A person gets saras for 7 different reasons. And I both say again, among those 7 reasons, I have to say the common denominator of those 7 reasons is that it's associated with chait. We always associate saras ultimately again with sin. So how can you say that the chatos that the mitzora brings at the end of his saras process is not about sin? Hasam, so Gemara says, no. Hasam minig'ei de'ich barlei. So we'll say the reality is, saras itself atones for the sin. Right? Whatever the guy did that brought about saras, the affliction of saras purges the sin. That's what atones for the sin. Why does he bring the carbon? Ki maisi carbon leishtaruye bekachim hu de kamaisi. When the mitzora brings the carbon at the end of the duration of his saras, that is not for kapara. That is not for atonement. What is that for? That's ultimately to allow him to once again eat sacrificial items. That's because he's tameh. So we call it a chatas, but in reality, that carbon is not being brought for the sin that brought on the tzaras. That carbon is being brought in order to retire him to partake of sacrificial items. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Nechi kamaisi carbon lishtare bekachum demaisi. It's almost right across in Rashi. Sheyesh tumos shetzrichan lakasav kapara letarasan zav v'zava v'yoledes mitzora v'nazir shenitma. That I will say ultimately again there are karbanos that require. There are requirements that are required in order to lift the state of ritual impurity to allow a person to re-engage with sacrificial items. But if that's the case, the chatas of a nazir should also require nisachim, these wine libations, because again, that chatas also is not coming as a result of chait. So yet we know that it doesn't require nisachim, to which the Gemara says, Savala Rabbi Elazar HaKafar, Da'amar Nazir Nami Chotehu. So the Gemara this time reflects the view of Rabbi Elazar HaKafar, who holds that what's supposed to say a little bit of a shout out to Nazir here, who says that a Nazir ultimately is a chote, he's a sinner because he abstained from that which was permitted, and therefore halacha lamaisa, his chatas really is a chatas. So we'll say what comes out from this is a number of different things. So first of all, we learn an important halacha by menachos, that again, the 3 basic criteria for menachos are shemen and levona, chitin, soles, shemen, levona, chitin, soles. The exceptions to those rules are minchas chote, carbon omer, and the minchas sotah. Minchas sotah being the most dramatic exception because it doesn't conform to any of the rules, ultimately again, of the menachos. Under normal circumstances, we would say that even a chatos should have shemen and levona, but clearly HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Torah felt that shelo yehei karbanon nedar. The idea over here is that shemen and levona beautifies the carbon. If somebody's bringing a carbon as a result of sin, we dafka don't want that carbon to look beautiful. Therefore, even though it turns out that technically speaking, the sinner is benefiting financially because he's saving on the shemen and levona, but we don't want to beautify that carbon that's coming as a result of sin. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, Keshem. So once I remember again, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said in the Mishnah, he said the same way Keshem, I'll just quote to you. He said, "Kishem shema'aseh ma'aseh behema, kach karbana ma'achal behema." The same way that her actions are the actions of an animal, that her immorality, so too her carbon ultimately is brought from animal food, from barley. So Tanya Amar Rabbi Gamliel Chachamim Sofrim. Rabbi Gamliel had a following conversation with his rabbinic colleague. Sofrim means scribes, but it means Talmidei Chachamim Hanichuli va'adrashenu kimin chomer. Give me a moment, and I will darshan this up like Kamin Chomer means like a beautiful jewel. Meaning, I want to tell you something that is beautiful. What's the beautiful part? Amud Beis, Tezal Beis. The Shamil Rimer de Kamar Hi ha'echilasa ma'adane olam lefichach karbano ma'achal behema. So Rabbi Gamliel says, I'll tell you why she brings her offering. I'll tell you why she brings her offering from barley, because she gave to him to eat ma'adane olam, the greatest delicacies of the world. Meaning the assumption is that she, the woman, enticed her adulterer. She made from a nice meal. She enticed him with beautiful delicacies. Therefore, karbana ma'achal behema. Therefore, her karban ultimately, again, is the antithesis of that with which she went ahead and engaged her adulterer. And therefore, again, her karban is ma'achal behema, is animal food. The Rabbi said back to Rabbi Gamliel, hatinach ashira. That's fine if the woman we're talking about is wealthy, meaning that she has money to go ahead and provide this man with all these delicacies. Aniya ma'ika l'meimar, but that logic won't exactly apply to a woman who is poor. To which the Gemara says, "Ela kashem shema." Rather, what it means is like this: kashem shema aseh ma'aseh behema. So Gamliel revised his understanding, and he said the same way that her actions were animal-like. Therefore, again, and that's I will say the idea over here is, if you look at Rashi says, "Elihi asa ma'aseh behema shefkira atzma l'tashmish l'misha eno ben zuga." Just like in the animal kingdom, again, you have many species of animals that are not particular whom they mate with. So too, again, she engaged in animalistic behaviors in that she's now engaging in intimacy with a man who is not her husband. Therefore, kach karbana ma'achal behema. Therefore, again, ultimately, her carbon is also made up of animal food, i.e. barley. Says the Mishnah, Haya maybe pili shel cheres. So we'll say they would bring pili. So pili literally is like a small receptacle or a small vial. So if a person so they brought a small vial, a small receptacle made of earthenware. So also remember, at this point in time, she has not admitted that she's committed adultery. So fine, she has committed adultery, so we're going forward with the process. So now they go ahead and they bring a small earthenware vessel, and they put into it a half a lug of mayim. Rashi just points out Hayamevi is a Kohen. It's the Kohen ultimately who is doing this avoda. So what happens? He puts a half a lug of water into it, mina kior, from the kior. Now Rashi says over here, kior dichsiv mayim kedoshim ve'ein kedoshim elashin is kanshu bekli. So we'll say we're going to discuss this more in the Gemara, but the reason he takes from the kior, so the kior, remember, was the large basin that the Kohanim would go ahead and wash their hands and feet from when they came to work, when they came to Beis Hamikdash in the morning. So also the Gemara says, the Mishnah saying over here, that the water for Sotah, Dafka had to come from the Kior. Dafka had to come from that large basin. Why? Because the pasuk, the Gemara says, and the Mishnah says, we'll discuss this more in the Gemara, the pasuk makes reference to sanctified waters for use in the Sotah process. Now, the only way waters become sanctified is how? If they are put into a klishar, if they're put into a service utensil. So the basin, the kiyar, is considered to be a service utensil, and therefore it's makdish that sanctifies the waters. So says the Gemara, so now he brings this small earthenware vessel, fills it up with a half a lug of wine from the kiyar. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't use a chatzi lug, rather we use a revius. Why? Because in the same way that we write the minimum possible, we use the minimum amount of water possible. And I will say this will make more sense later on. There's machlokes later on in the Gemara about how much of Parsha Sotah you write on a piece of parchment that is going to be dissolved. We're going to say Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that you write as little as possible. So just like he requires less print, he also requires less water. So we'll say, so now we have the water in the earthenware vessel. Nichnas laheichal upana liyamino. So we'll say it's really interesting. So now this is the Kohen. Kohen walks into the Heichal, walks into the Beis Hamikdash, upana liyamino, he turns to the right. Umakum hayasham, there was a place there on the floor, amma al amma, there was an amma by amma square on the floor. V'tabla shel shaish and shel sheish, and there was remember the Beis Hamikdash floor was all marble. It was all marble. So there was one square, an amma by amma of marble. V'tabas haisa kavuaba. And there was a ring on that square of marble. And what happens? You can lift up that square. You can lift up that amma by amma floor square. And what happens? Kushumagbia vinota afar mitachta. So I'll say, if you lifted up that amma by amma square of marble, what would you find there? There'd be dirt. So you would take some of the dirt. Vinota afar mitachta. You take some of the dirt underneath that slab of marble. V'nosein kedei shira alamayim. And you take that dirt and you mix it in with the water. How much dirt do you have to put in the water? Enough that the dirt itself is visible. Rashi says over here, kedei shira. The dirt itself must be visible and apparent on the water. Because the pasuk says, because the pasuk says quite explicitly, from the earth, from the dirt that is on the earth, that is in the ground of the Mishkan, the Kohen shall take and shall put it in the water. Says the Gemara. So we'll say, now we're going to go through this Mishnah. So let's first speak about the earthenware vessel. So Tana, Pili shel cheres chadash, Rabbi Yishmael. So Rabbi Yishmael says that you have to use a brand new earthenware vessel. Right? You can't use a used earthenware vessel. It has to be brand new for each sota. So my time, Rabbi Yishmael. What's Rabbi Yishmael's logic? Gomer kli mimitzora. So he learns that exer shava of kli utensil from mitzora, from the person's strict matzaras. What does this mean? Ma lahalon cheres chadasha. Just like by the mitzora. Now, where are we using a kli cheres by mitzora? So take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, "V'gamar mi mitzora, v'shachat esat sipor ha'achas el kli cheres." Remember again, this is talking about when you shecht the bird. When you shecht the bird, you shall place the blood into a kli cheres. So the Gemara says like this: Ma lahalon, just like by the kli cheres by mitzora, cheres chadasha. It has to be a brand new earthenware utensil. Afkan cheres chadasha. So I both say. So again, here's what we're doing. We're saying just like by mitzvah, it has to be a brand new earthenware vessel, and essentially you're making zir shav of kli. It says kli by mitzvah. It says kli by sota. Just like kli by mitzvah means brand new earthenware vessel, so to what? So to kli by sota also means brand new earthenware vessel. Says the Gemara. But 1 second, now you just said that it has to be a brand new earthenware vessel by mitzvah. But what? Where do you know that from? Right? How do you establish that? V'shachat esat tzipor ha'achas el kli cheres al mayim chayim. Because the pasuk says, remember, also by the mitzvah there are two birds, one that you shecht, one that you dip into the blood, and then you let free. You let that free. So the pasuk says, you shall slaughter the one bird el kli cheres into the earthenware utensil al mayim chayim. Literally, I'm both saying mayim chayim. Mayim Chaim, not the Hamish brand. I'm not talking right. But again, Mayim Chaim over here means spring water. Spring water. So says the Gemara. So Mayim Chaim Shalom Nesta Bahin Malacha. So we'll say, remember, Mayim Chaim has a connotation of water that was never used for anything else. Af kli shelo ne'asta b'malacha. So to again, I will say the kli cheres also could never have anything done. It has to be brand new. So what the Gemara is essentially saying is like this: that the Torah is linking the items mentioned in the psukim. So Torah mentions again the mayim chaim and mentions the kli cheres. Just like the mayim chaim has to be quote unquote new, meaning you can't take waters that were used for other things and use it for this process. So just like the waters have to be new, so too what? The kli cheres, the earthenware utensil, also has to be new. To which, and therefore, we'll say, if we just pause here for just a moment, therefore, so now I see that kli cheres by mitzvah means a new kli cheres, and then the gzera shava of what? Of kli from Metzora to Sotah teaches me that just like the kli cheres by Metzora is a new kli cheres, so too the kli cheres by Sotah also has to be a new kli cheres. But on second says the Gemara, Imala alan mayim chayim, afkan mayim chayim. But I will say, so if that's the case, that you're making gzera shava between Metzora and between Sotah, so why don't you say Just in the same way that by Mitzorah you need Mayim Chaim, you need spring water. So why don't you say what? Why don't you say that by Sotah you also require spring water? But yet that's not what the Mishnah said. Where am I getting the water for the Sotah process from? Kvikiyar. To which the Gemara says, to which the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Hachinami. According to Rabbi Shmuel, that is, you're right. You are satisfying that criteria. Dam Rabbi Yochanan, May Kiyar. Rabbi Yishmael Omer May Ma'ayon Hein. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Yishmael holds that essentially the waters of the Kiyar have the status of Mayim Chaim, have the status ultimately again of water that emanates from a spring. So it says, therefore, again, we would be satisfying that criteria as well. To which the Gemara says, Mishar Memos. The Chum understand, on the other hand, that Lamaisa, again, it doesn't have to be spring water. Rather, again, it could go ahead and be from other water. So again, what we're holding right now is it appears that Lamaisa, we have made a satisfactory Gezer Shava. So Gezer Shava of Kli, from Mitzorah to Sotah. Just like by Mitzorah, I require a brand new earthenware utensil, as we've established, because again, the Kli Cheres is linked to Mayim Chaim. So too, again, by Sotah, I require a brand new earthenware utensil. But says the Gemara, but I could make a question. I could pose a pircha on that Gzeir Shava. I could pose a question to the Gzeir Shava. Mal Mitzorah shekein taun eitz erez ve'izavush nitolas. So essentially, the Gemara says, I don't understand how you're linking these two processes. They're dramatically different. The Mitzorah requires, remember, a piece of cedar wood, hyssop, and red wool. In other words, that you're comparing apples and oranges. The process of purification for the Mitzorah requires all of these other pieces. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rabba, Amar Kra. The Rabba says, the pasuk says, Bekli Cheres, Kli Sha'amarti Lecha Kivar. To which the Gemara says, Rabba says, I'll tell you how we know that it has to be a Kli Cheres, because it says, literally, Kli Sha'amarti Lecha Kivar, which means a utensil that I have already told you. In other words, we'll say, what does that mean? So what the Gemara is suggesting is something very interesting. The Gemara is suggesting that when the pasuk over here speaks about Kli Cheres, well, actually, look at Rashi. It's actually right across in Rashi. Amar Rabba, Bekli Sha'amarti Lecha Kvar, Haki Mashma Le L'Rabba. So this is how we are to understand Rabba's statement. Midelo ksiv v'lokach kli cheres v'nosan bo mayim. From the fact that the pasuk does not say, and you shall take a kli cheres and you shall put water into it. Uksiv bikli cheres. You both say it doesn't say that you shall take a kli cheres, but rather it says bikli cheres, in a kli cheres. So the Gemara understands from that shekvar husku kli zeh b'makom acher. V'amrach manahacha sheba osa kli shamarti l'chav b'makom acher kach osam uman nihu mitzora. So that's an amazing diuk. So the pasuk by Sotah says that you shall place the water bikli cheres. Bikli cheres, the Gemara understands, means in the kli cheres that we already spoke about. What's the kli cheres that we already spoke about? The kli cheres that was spoken about by where? By Mitzorah. And to teach me again, just like the kli cheres by Mitzorah ultimately is a new kli, so to the kli cheres by Sotah also has to be a new kli. Amarav. Lo shanu ella. So we'll say. So therefore, it appears that the Gemara has satisfaction. Now, again, remember, this is only one sad. This is Rabbi Shmuel. But at least according to Rabbi Shmuel, we've established that Allah L'maisa, not only do you have to use a new kli cheres, but again, it has to be a brand new kli cheres. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Lo shanu ella shlonis achmu panav. So Rava says, this is only true when the kli itself has not become blackened. As well say, so what's happening over here? So remember, look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Lo shanu rabbanan demasnisin deba'u cheres umachshri biyashan. So says Rava, even those who say that you could use an old kli cheres, they only say that when when the kli itself is not blackened. However, on this achmu panav, but if the kli itself is blackened, then psulin, then ultimately again the kli is possible to be used for sotah purposes. My taima, what's the reason? Dumya demayim, because it is comparable to the water. Ma mayim shlo nishtanu, just like water can only be used if its appearance hasn't changed. Af kli shalom nishtana. So too, again, the utensil ultimately could only be used when? If it has not changed. So we'll say, even those who don't require you to have a brand new kli cheres, at the end of the day, will only let you use the kli cheres if the appearance of the kli cheres is normal. But if it's become blackened because of use, you may not use it. So by Rava asked the following kasha, Nis achmu v'echzion soch kiv shana ish v'nis labnu mahu. What happens if you have the following situation? Let's say you have a kli cheres that became blackened through use, but then you put it back, I think, what do you call it, into the kiln? I think that's what it's called. Right? Into the fire. I'm sorry? Yeah, kiln. Aren't you an accountant, Mr. Schoenfeld? Aren't you an accountant? Right, okay. Right, the kiln. Potter, I understand. So, right, so what happens? So if you put it back into the kiln, right, and then what happens? You literally, v'lisnavdu means it becomes whitened. The idea over here is you remove the blackness from it. So what's the halacha? Mi amrinan kevan de itchu, o dilma kevan de hadr. So it's an interesting shaila. So let's say now I have an earthenware utensil that became blackened. So in this state right now, it cannot be used. But now I put it back into the oven, I put it back into the kiln, and I take away the blackness. It looks like new. So can I use it now? Can I use it now for Sotah or not? The fundamental shaila is, do we say that once it's set aside for non-use, it cannot be used no matter what you do for it? Or do we say no? The reason it was unusable is because it was blackened, but if you remedy that situation, then l'maisi you can use it again. So Tashma, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Eitz Erez ve'ezov u'shnitolas, shehev shilbahen kupas alachorav. Well, it's an interesting case. So remember, this is going back to the Metzora. Let's say you take the piece of cedar wood, or the hyssop, or the red thread, and you use it to tie your bundle, and you use it to literally as like a rope to put your bundle over your shoulder. Okay? So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, so psulin. So ultimately, these items can no longer be used for the purification of the Metzora process. Hadri umifshiti. But in a case like that, Rabbi say, once you untie them from the bundle, the assumption is what? They'll spring back into their original form. So why is it problematic to use it? So I'll say, so what would you see from here? The fact that their apostle seems to indicate that what? That once you've set aside something for non-use, even if you're able to restore its original state in which it would be usable, the item still remains unusable. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not a good raya. Hasam de iklof iklufe. That's different because in that case, what happens? Literally, the items change. Iklof iklufe literally means it became peeled. The idea over there is that lemaisa again, either the hyssop or the cedar peeled, and therefore because it changed state, therefore it cannot be used. Nichnas lahechol upanali yamino. So also, remember again now. So first of all, in this situation, so again, the way the Rambam paskins by Hilchos Sotah is that by a Sotah we use a new kli cheres. So he passes like Rabbi Yishmael that Allah lemaisa again it has to go ahead and be a brand new kli cheres. So the Gemara goes weiter. Nichnas lahechol upanali yaminos. Remember again, the next part of the Mishnah said the kohen enters into the heichal, and what happens? He goes to the right. So which the Gemara says, "My taima." Why does he turn to the right? The Amar Mar kol pinos sha'ata pona lo yu ela derech yamin. Right? Anytime you make a turn in life, your turns should always be to the right. So we'll say this is not a hashkafic statement, right? This is a halachic statement. The idea is, we understand the right always has a chashivas, always has an importance. So just again, when situating himself, so the kohen turns to the right, he positions himself in a way that he has to turn to the right to get to this panel. Makom hayasham. Remember again, so the Mishnah said that he gets to this marble square in the floor of the Beis Hamikdash that has the tabas, the ring onto it, and he lifts it up and takes from the dirt underneath the marble square. To which the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanon omin ha'afar asher yihya. Remember the halacha is he takes from the dirt that's on the ground. Yochel yitakin mi bachutz the yachnis. So I might have thought that he could even bring this dirt from outside the Beis Hamikdash and bring it into the Beis Hamikdash. Talmud lomar bekarka hamishkan. Therefore, the pasuk says that the dirt has to come from the floor of the Mishkan. I bekarka mishkan yochel yachpar bekardumos. So I might have thought that if it has to come from the dirt of the Mishkan, maybe even if he has to dig down, he should have to dig down Kardumos means like with shovels and axes. Talmud Lomar Asher Yihya. The pasuk says he takes it from the dirt that is there. That is there, Abosa, means what? That it's present and ready to be used without any real work. Haketz. So how exactly do you reconcile these two psukim? Yesham have. So we'll say if there's dirt in the floor of the Mishkan, the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, so you take it from there. Ein sham, if there's no dirt readily available, so let's say there's no usable dirt without digging down, then in that case, sotain sham. In that case, we'll say, what can you do? You bring dirt from the outside, but what? You place it on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash or of the Mishkan, and then you scoop it up from there. So interestingly enough, the halach is the dirt must come from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, but you don't have to exert yourself to find that dirt. So again, you could actually, if there's no available dirt on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash or on the Mishkan, you could bring dirt from the outside, but it has to be placed on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, and then once again taken from that floor. But again, remember, this is just Gzeres HaKasav. This is just based on the pasuk. So the Gemara just says, Yesham avinish einsham teinsham. Tanya idach. Another brayso says, Umina afra asher yihya melamed shahaya mitaking. So actually, let's do this. Tanya idach. Another brayso says, Umina afra asher yihya, from the afra. Actually, no, we'll stop over here. Well, Emirat Hashem, we'll want to stop at Tanya idach. Emirat Hashem will pick up with the further discussion about the dirt from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash tomorrow.